my name is Stein, and that was a pretty good introduction. But I guess I'd like to start out by saying what really makes Inklings a unique organization, because we're a collection of student journalists. But our staff is really important, because we have 65 members just continually writing and putting up stories. And for the online version of the website, which I help to manage, all of the continuous updates, multiple times a day, just getting news to the student body and abroad is just really important. And that's what the students help to do. In addition, we have 3 great faculty advisors who really help to direct the content. But even more than that, they offer support and guidance in editorial decisions, and that's why they're really integral to that high school journalism. And finally, there's the Staples administration. Mr. Yodig was just with us, but he's absolutely great because the administration does have the right to censor the paper, but in general, they've been pretty good and allow us to pursue challenging and sometimes controversial topics. So enough about Inklings. What really makes journalism important in the community? First, on the high school level, it creates awareness, especially of current issues. When I was writing an article about, there was a sushi restaurant, a local sushi restaurant, that was adding 18% tips into the bills of teenagers. I just thought that was particularly interesting. So what it does is it didn't just end with the Staples community. It created a lot of publicity, and it created awareness of the issue around town. In addition, Inklings and journalism in particular creates a forum for ideas. It's called a marketplace of ideas in journalism lingo, especially in the opinion section. I mean, just recently we had a writer speculate on the potential effects of the Arab Spring. He thought it would really bring about democracy, and then we had a contrasting opinion who thought this writer thought it would just evolve into anarchy. So that's an example of creating a forum. Third, who doesn't like money? Journalism is a real investment into not just into the minds of students, but also into the local economy, because through advertising, Inklings acts as an intermediary between the businesses that target the students and the students themselves. And because it's really effective, and it represents an investment into local businesses. And fourth, journalism represents a voice. And I could say the voice of the student body, but it's not just that. It's also a voice for the people that ordinarily wouldn't have their voices heard. For example, when I was writing an article about a graffiti vandal that was roaming the halls of Staples under the alias of Blunt Kid, I was talking to a janitor, a custodian at Staples, and the custodians generally don't have their opinions presented. It's just, they're generally left out. And through this interview, I was able to understand how this affected the man's job. And it was just a really great interview. So that's what journalism can do. It can bring people to the forefront. When I search for news, because sometimes I'm not assigned articles, but I really look and try to find news wherever it exists. And I found that it's really important to listen to people. It could just be a lunchroom conversation. I was listening to a friend over lunch, and she said that on her varsity sports team, there were 20 members and 5 captains. And I thought that was a little perplexing because it's a pretty high ratio. And then I was able to further explore from that, but listening really helped to facilitate that. Secondly, exploring different topics, also exploring different places. I had never gone to the sushi place. This was the first time I went there. And this article was a result of just trying something new. So changing up a routine can really help to facilitate good ideas. Thirdly, comparing. And what I mean by comparing is comparing how things should be with how they actually are, the ideal versus the status quo. There's a pledge in the Staples Athletic Handbook that says that varsity athletes can't drink or do drugs. But then when I took a poll, unofficially, just to start, 95% said that they did anyway, so it didn't really, that helped to create and segue into another article. But ideas are just ideas until they're kind of morphed into something different, something really concrete. And that's what synthesizing is all about. It takes ideas and creates an article. And one of the ways to do that is to determine angles. Angles are a really important part of the story because it's what the story is all about. In understanding the who, what, when, where, and why, the reader can understand the article and also what you seek to gain from writing the article. But it's also really important to know who to ask. It's not just different types of people, but different people with different occupations. I mean, if you're writing an article on why perhaps the Gaddafi is likely to be overthrown or not, a political analyst might be better to answer that question than just a man on the street. So diversifying is very important. But in preparing to create an interview, I've always found it extremely useful to come up with a general set of questions because that can help guide the discussion and help the interviewee understand what you want to accomplish. In interviewing, I found that it's very useful to be tolerant. And by being tolerant, I mean allow the interviewee to talk. When I was interviewing the athletic director on this issue with the captains, he mentioned that he was, as a result of the high number of captains on certain teams, he was drafting a reform to limit them and to proportion them based on the amount of people on the team. But I never would have gotten that information had I not just listened to what he had to say. If I had adhered to just a rigid set of questions, as I did when I first started interviewing, you don't get that kind of information. Secondly, being resourceful. And being resourceful can mean just knowing how the hierarchy works and working through people of different occupations and diversifying your sources. When I write an article, I generally try to get the man on the street interviews because those are really important in order to understand how the average person might conceive the idea, but also to talk to the administration and officials and other credible sources, so that's important. Being polite is pretty self-explanatory. Generally, it doesn't work to just accost people and be really gung-ho about interviewing because they might not want to answer your questions if you go about it that way. And fourthly, being consistent. And always, before you end an interview, always ask, is there anything else that you'd like to say? That is the best question you can possibly ask. Because Mr. Doty, he's not here right now, but he's our high school principal. He was in here earlier. And he offers the best end quotes when you ask him that question. I was, with the graffiti vandal, I asked if there was anything else he'd like to say. And he said, he alone is besmirching the reputation of staple students undeservedly. And that's just a great direct quote because, as it says here, direct quotes can do what paraphrasing can't. They offer some human element to the story, and that's really important. In addition, with organization of the story, just breaking it up, because as news transitions into the online format, people generally do have pretty short attention spans. You have to keep their attention within the first 2 or 3 sentences or the article's entirely lost. But with direct quotes, what you can do that's really cool is offer some kind of juxtaposition. For example, when I was writing the sushi article and some source claimed that they had been thrown out of the restaurant for not tipping a certain amount. It said that they had tipped 13% and they were thrown out of the restaurant. I went to the manager and I asked her if that was true. And it can really offer just a good he said, she said, but it's very organized that way. And finally, with subtopics, that's all about keeping people's attention. I've noticed that if it's broken up into the background, what's going on, and the future, it can really make it clear to the reader. There are some nuances in journalism that are very important for any reporter to be aware of. First and foremost, there's the right of reply, because if someone criticizes something that someone else does, for example, with this article with the restaurant, when someone asked whether or not that their practice was illegal, I had to go to the manager and also to a bunch of lawyers to understand and further balance the article, because you can't just make those accusations and then print them, as that would be libel. Also, something that Inklings does that's really important is we try to have at least 3 or 4 sources per article in order to ensure and mitigate bias, because bias is a journalist's worst enemy. If there's just one point of view being presented, it can really just destroy the credibility of a news source. So having multiple sources and different types of sources is really important. As Inklings goes towards the future, there are a lot of things that we're trying to work on, but there are 3 major ones. The first one is to promote. And we're not just promoting quality journalism, we're promoting the community. We're promoting the artists like Carson who come up with these projects. We're trying to really get involved with media in that way. In addition, we're promoting businesses and businesses that invest in the community. Second, we're engaging. We try to engage the community in articles that are thorough and thought-provoking and opinions that really matter, and things that might matter to the students in a more limited capacity. For example, the scheduling system that was just recently overhauled, but even on the global scale in the world. And third, we want to inspire. We want to inspire journalists to continue to write. We want to inspire our own writers. But we also want to inspire musicians. One of the things we're trying to do on the website for this year is to feature local music artists, just because we want to bring them to the forefront. And we hope to inspire the community. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Long live investigative journalism.